Hello everyone. Tonight we're taking a trip back to a time when a single red spot on your skin could mean your death. This isn't a horror movie. We're talking about smallpox, the disease that terrified Europe and made mothers afraid to kiss their babies. You might think you're tough, but if you were thrown into the 14th century with this disease, you probably wouldn't survive 3 days. So before you get too comfortable, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And don't forget to leave a comment with your location and local time, so I know where in the world you're listening from. Now, turn off the lights, turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's start our night journey together. You wake up in a thick fog. No alarm clock, no Wi-Fi, no morning coffee. Just the sound of roosters crowing and the smell of damp hay rising from the cold ground. A chill runs down your spine, and it's not just the weather. Your forehead is as hot as fresh bread, but your skin is covered in tiny welts, as if someone sprinkled thorns on you while you slept. The innkeeper looks at you, shakes her head, and crosses herself. She mumbles something about God's wrath. You have no choice but to leave the village. They're afraid you'll infect the community, and to be honest, you're afraid too. You trudge through the muddy streets, as muddy as cold porridge, and every cough feels like your chest is about to burst. No one touches you. Child looks at you from afar. Then your mother pulls you back like you are a demon. A traveler limped closer. His eyes were red as dried blood. He asked softly, "Do you feel itchy? If you start scratching, it's gone." You ask him if there is any cure. He laughs. "Yes, go into the woods. Find the silver grass. Chew its roots until your mouth tastes like floor cleaner. Then wait. If you don't die, maybe you'll get better." Curiously, the plant is actually used in traditional European medicine. While it doesn't cure smallpox, it does reduce fever and calm the immune system. But you don't know that. You have only a faint hope, and your mouth is now as bitter as the disappointment of a student who forgot to do his homework. As night falls, you light a small fire in the woods. Your skin begins to blister, as rough as the moon. Each blister is a small pit filled with pus, as if your body were boiling itself a deadly soup. These spots could be a sign of a form of smallpox called virile major, a killer more ruthless than bank interest. You remember what an old lady once said, "If you live through Saturday without breaking a pimple, you have a chance. If not, God will take you back." On the third day, you start daydreaming. In your dream, you are in a state-of-the-art spa, applying lotion and listening to lo-fi music. But in reality, you're lying on the ground, your face covered in rotting leaves, and there's a squirrel staring at you like you're a late lunch. In the midst of your delirium, you feel a hand touch your forehead. A girl dressed in coarse cloth and a headscarf looks at you sympathetically. She is not afraid. She had smallpox last year and survived. She tells you that you need to bleed yourself to cool down. A common practice in those days, but not recommended if you want to conserve enough blood to survive. She makes a small incision in your wrist. The blood flows out like a thin, hot tomato sauce. Some historians still debate whether this bloodletting helped or just hastened the patient's death. Either way, you feel better, or maybe it's because you've lost some of your consciousness. Here's a weird fact. In the Middle Ages, people believed that smallpox liked hot, dry bodies. So they would lay patients by cold pools or cover them with wet blankets. You're shivering in the middle of the woods, wishing someone would take you home. But this isn't Netflix. This is survival. You dream that you are flying high above your village. People light fires to ward off the poisonous fumes, what they believe causes illness. No one knows about viruses, bacteria, or antibodies. Just faith and a little bit of magic. You wake up early in the morning on the 4th day. Your skin is red. The blisters are starting to dry. You are still alive. hungry, exhausted, but alive. And the strangest thing? The mosquitoes in the woods don't dare come near you. Maybe it's the smell. Or maybe they're afraid of getting smallpox, too. You laugh dryly. A weak laugh in the dark forest. You know you have to keep going. Have to understand better. Have to survive. Because you are not just a patient. You are about to be the one to tell this story to the next generation. You keep walking, your legs sinking into puddles of mud as if the ground is trying to hold you back. The blisters on your skin are now crusted brown, dry like bread left in the oven. With each step, your skin tightens, aching as if someone is repeatedly poking toothpicks into your vertebrae. But you're alive. The question is, for how long? A white smoke rises in the distance. You walk towards it and see a small monastery nestled on the edge of the forest, its stone walls covered with vines and moss, as if nature had deliberately hidden it from the world. You knock 3 times on the gate. An old monk with a white beard opens it, stares at you, and nods, as if he has been waiting for you all along. His name is Alfric. His voice is soft, like the wind in the trees. He tells you that the illness you have just recovered from is a punishment, not from nature, but from God. Smallpox is his fire, he said, to burn those who are too proud or do not pray enough. You sit in the chapel, where flickering candlelight cast shadows of saints on the walls, as if they were moving and whispering. The monastery holds many ancient manuscripts. Some are in Latin, others in Arabic, Greek, and even ancient Celtic. One says to apply clay mixed with holy water to pimples. Another recommends a mixture of charcoal, wine, and pigeon blood. A faded handwritten note recounts a miracle. A man cured of smallpox after being tied to an oak tree for 3 days and nights, starved, and anointed by a nun. As you read, you shiver. Not because you're afraid, but because you're hungry, and it seems like the man has been there before. Monk Alfred believed strongly in the power of prayer. Every morning he made you kneel, recite the rosary 100 times, and dip your hands in holy water until your fingers were wrinkled, as if you had been swimming in the tub for 2 hours. When you asked him what herbs helped, he smiled slightly. Weak people often turn to plants. Faith is the real medicine, but you're not sure. One night, while he's sleeping, you sneak down to the basement storage room. There, you discover a small room where the monks keep items they don't want people to see. A small cutting knife, a ceramic jar of a strange black powder, and a worn book chronicling failed treatments. It seems Alfred tried everything: bloodletting, fumigation, and lighting fires under patients' beds to drive the evil spirits out of their pores. A curious fact: many medieval monks were both priests and physicians by choice. They recorded their medical experiments, but they had to disguise them in theological terms to avoid church censure. One wrote, "Too much blood disturbs the soul." Another way of saying sepsis. You ask him about it the next day. Monk Alfric is not angry. He is just sad. He says that he once cured a child, but was forbidden by the church to do so again because it was not an authentic blessing. He continues, secretly, but each time it is another sin added to the list. Historians still debate whether monks like Alfric were pioneers in medical research, or just superstitious people with the ability to justify their beliefs with the Bible. The evidence is too thin to be definitive, but you can be sure of one thing. He tried. One rainy afternoon, gray as a stone, you and Alfric sat next to each other. He told you that if you wanted to survive any longer, you needed to leave the monastery. Here, faith is the medicine. Out there are people who use their hands, knives, and fire. They can save you, or they can kill you, but you will learn something real. Before leaving, he slipped a small package into his friend's hand. Inside were dry leaves, seeds, and a piece of paper written in brown ink. Nigella sativa, used as tea. Good for the lungs. It's black cumin seed, an herb that has been documented since the time of the famous Arab physician Avicenna. While there was no clear scientific evidence at the time, some modern research suggests it may have anti-inflammatory effects. You thank him. He touches your forehead lightly, giving you a final blessing. Go, son. Don't let illness teach you faith. Let faith teach you to understand illness. You emerge from the monastery carrying not only the seeds and the scars, but also the sense that knowledge does not always come with light. Sometimes it must hide under the thick ash of ritual, afraid of being consumed by the fire of faith. The wind picks up. You wrap your clothes tightly. A bell rings behind you, ringing in the mist like a farewell, and you continue your journey, this time with a new thought. If the gods don't save you, perhaps mortals will. You follow the path down into the valley, where the mist thins and pale sunlight illuminates vineyards, thatched cottages, and the occasional wild grouse darting from the bushes in futile threats. Your back still aches, the scabs still haven't fallen off, but you're starting to feel hungry again, an unmistakable sign of life. Late in the afternoon, you arrive at a small village on the banks of a river. A large wooden board stands at the gate, scrawled in charcoal. No one enters without scars. You roll up your sleeve, revealing your smallpox scars, still as dark as old ink on parchment. The two guards look at you, nod, and silently open the gate. This village, known locally as Thal, is inhabited by those who survived the plague. They call themselves the Chosen, not out of pride but out of fear. Every person you meet bears some sort of scar, on their face, their hands, or even invisible ones. You are taken to a small wooden house by the river, where a woman named Isolde practices medicine with something you've never seen before, a blend of herbs and statistics. Isolde did not recite prayers. She read statistics. She said that in the village, 6 out of 10 infected people died if they were given cold compresses, but only 3 died if they were kept warm, given boiled water, and eaten thyme soup. It's not God who chooses who survives, she said, her eyes never leaving the boiling pot, but who knows how to cook the right leaves. She shows you a blue-violet flowered herb called borrego, borax. Boiling it with willow bark will help reduce fever and soothe pain. It's one of the old recipes that people now know contains salicin, the precursor to modern aspirin. You take a sip. It tastes as bitter as dishwater, but you feel better afterward. A curious fact, many effective herbal medicines of the Middle Ages were only rediscovered hundreds of years later. Borage, thyme, evening primrose, all had obvious effects, but at that time they were known only through trial and error, and sometimes the intuition of women like Isolde. You study with her for 3 weeks. Every morning, you go out into the fields to pick grass, grind roots, and dry leaves. You learn to distinguish poisonous plants from medicinal ones, something you once thought you could do with the simple Google search. She teaches you that if the decoction turns red, you must test it with silver. If the silver changes color, the leaf can kill a mouse in 3 minutes, and you in 10. She also said that when the epidemic broke out in this village 3 years ago, the villagers had a choice: burn down all the sick people's houses to prevent the spread, or leave them to their fate. They burned down 16 houses, leaving nothing but ashes and cries. Some people call us cruel. Death is crueler, said Isolde. Modern historians still debate whether isolating the sick by burning their possessions was justified or inhumane. There is evidence that the measure slowed the spread of the disease in some areas, but the psychological and social consequences lasted for centuries. You know one thing for sure: when all a village has is a pot of soup and 2 flutes, survival is a luxury worth sacrificing. One day, wind chimes are heard from the east of the village. A group of people is coming. about 10 of them, their faces covered with scarves, their gait weary. You run to warn Isolde. She doesn't panic. She's prepared. She has a bag of medicine, a rag, a pot of boiling water. You follow, for the first time not as a sick person, but as a healer. As you approach the group, you notice none of them have scars. They are in the early stages of the disease. You see a little boy, shivering, his eyes white, his lips dry and cracked. His mother holds him like a candle about to go out. Please save him. We heard there is the woman here who knows magic. Isolde was no witch, but you thought she was the closest thing to a miracle you had ever seen. She laid the boy on a bed of grass, wiped his forehead with chamomile water, dripped wild ginger root into his mouth, and sat by his side all night. You look at her, the light from the fireplace reflecting on her tanned face, and her eyes red from lack of sleep. She looks like a warrior, but her weapons are a wooden spoon and centuries of oral knowledge. A bowl in one hand, hope in the other. The next morning, the boy was still alive. You felt relieved, not so much by faith, but by the feeling that maybe, just maybe, not everyone had to die of smallpox. You remembered the silverweed from the forest, the hand of the priest Alfric on your forehead, and now Isolde with the steaming pot of water that smelled of lemon and mint. You stay in the village for a few more weeks, helping, taking notes, learning. And then one morning, when the mist has not yet lifted and the sparrows have not yet quarreled, you know it is time to leave. Isolde saw you to the gate. She didn't say much. She just handed you a small cloth bag. Inside is dry powder. If you have a fever, mix it with hot water and drink a sip. If you don't have a fever, use it to wash your hands. Anyway, don't lick your hands after touching a sick person. You laugh. She doesn't. I'm serious. Last time I had to save a curious apprentice. He hadn't slept for 3 days because he tasted the potion. You wave goodbye, and once again, you set out on your journey. This time, you bring more than just scars. You bring knowledge, and the belief that life can be brewed from roots, boiling water, and patience. The trail leads you into a darker forest, where light falls to the ground in thin, silvery strands. The crunch of dry leaves under your feet mingles with the wind like the whispers of the dead. You pull your cloak closer to you, the smell of rotting leaves and wild mushrooms a silent warning. This is not a place for the faint-hearted. You have no clear destination, just a nagging feeling that somewhere in the north there is an ancient monastery once built by a mysterious order of monks, famous not for their prayers, but for healing entire villages with smoke and chanting. It sounds strange, almost superstitious, but after what you've seen, you can't dismiss anything so easily. After 3 days of traveling, you come to a low-lying plain where a group of people live in round huts thatched with grass, which look like large mushrooms growing out of the mud. They have no monastery, no priest, and no official doctor, but they do have a smoke blower. You meet him just as the sky is getting dark. A tall, thin man. His face is wrinkled as a dried goat skin, wrapped in a red turban, holding a bundle of smoking grass. His name is Eoben. The villagers call him the exorcist, but he chuckles and says, "Where does evil come from? Just bacteria and bad smells." You almost laugh out loud, but then you see how he works. He burns bundles of strong-smelling herbs, a mix of sage, juniper, rosemary, and something that smells a lot like burnt leather. The smoke fills the room like a ghostly mist, making you cough. But the strange thing is, the air feels cleaner, easier to breathe, and somehow pure. He told you. What does smoke do? It keeps insects away. It dries the air. And most of all, it makes people feel like something is being done. And when people feel like they're being taken care of, they live longer. Here's a curious fact. In many parts of medieval Europe, Smoke fumigation was a key method of fighting the plague. People burned sulfur, resin, animal skins, and even dried excrement, in the belief that the stench would drive away evil spirits. Today, we know that some smokes actually have antiseptic properties, like the smoke from sage or eucalyptus, but others suffocated people. That little detail, unfortunately, is often overlooked. You watch Eoben treat. He enters the hut of a smallpox patient, smokes it out of sight, and sits beside the patient, chanting a chant over and over like a mantra. But it is not Latin, nor is it a prayer. It's my mother's song, he explained. She used to sing it when I had a fever. I don't know what it does, but everyone needs a familiar sound when they think they're dying. You can't argue with that, because even you, who survived on convents and herbs, long for a soothing voice when you're feverish. In the days that followed, you helped Eoben collect leaves, dry grass, and sort out scents. He taught you how to identify juniper by the black spots on its stems, how to break the base of a sage plant without cutting your fingers, and how to adjust the amount of smoke so that the room was dim but not suffocating. One night, as the two of them prepared a new bundle of medicine, Eoben told his friend about a group of beggars who had come to the village 3 years earlier. Among them was a pregnant woman who had contracted smallpox so severely that she could barely see. He smoked her, sang to her, and kept her alive for 4 days. She died, but the baby survived. Some people say I failed. I think keeping life in death is the best thing we can do. You were silent, not because you didn't know what to say, but because for the first time, you felt like you were getting a deeper understanding of what it was all about. Not a cure in the modern sense, but prolonging life long enough for hope to come. Historians still debate the role of smoke healers, like Eoben. Some call them the forerunners of community medicine, the first to understand hygiene and spiritual healing. Others say they were just unwitting actors who slowed down the scientific process with their unproven methods. But you see him now as essential, someone who made the final hours less lonely. As you prepare to leave the village, Eoben gives you a small bundle of dried herbs, tied with hemp. Not to burn, just smell it. Whenever you feel hopeless, remember this smell. You press the bundle to your nose. The scent is spicy, strangely pleasant. It doesn't bring power, but it brings memories. And sometimes that's enough. You turn away from the white smoke, but with it a new lesson. Healing doesn't always come from medicine. Sometimes it comes from a scent, a song, or simply the feeling that someone is sitting next to you in the dark. You leave the smoky village, where Eoben stands still as a statue by the trail, the smoke of his cigarettes curling around his head like the halo of some strange saint. That night, as you pitch your tent under an old oak and unwrap the herbs he has given you, the scent is a reminder, even in the deep woods, you carry with you what you have learned, and the people you once believed to be crazy may actually be right. The journey takes you to a monastery nestled in the mountains, where nuns wear robes as black as night and speak in whispers. The monastery is called Domus Spiraculi, the House of Breath. There they practice no smoking, no ointments, just isolation, as radical and cold as an emotional embargo. As soon as you arrive, a nameless nun uses her cane to guide you into an empty room with cold plaster walls and a door locked from the outside. If there are any signs of illness, stay there. If after 7 days there are no red spots, we will let you out. Her voice was as dry as tree bark. If there are, we will move you to another room. Do you want to protest? Yes, but something in her eyes silences you. Not hostility, but the weariness of someone who has seen too many people die. For the first 7 days, there is no fever, no rash, just confusion. You count the cracks in the walls, listen for footsteps in the hallway, and sometimes wonder if you are being forgotten in a system of rules. Food is pushed in through a small slot, and the only words spoken are the short Latin words like a mantra, memento vivere, remember to live. On the 8th day, you are moved to a larger room with sunlight and a small window overlooking the vegetable garden. There, you begin to understand their principles. Everything must be kept separate. The sick cannot see the healthy. Clothes must be boiled. Hands must be washed with vinegar and lye. No hugging, no touching, and of course, no talking much. You think, how can you live like that? But then you see the nursing nuns, one by one, in long-sleeved robes, their faces covered with vinegar-soaked towels. They enter the patient's room for just 5 minutes. They don't wipe the body. They don't give medicine. They just leave a bowl of hot soup, change the sheets, and leave. There's no comfort, no smile. But each time, the patient is still alive the next day. A historical fact worth noting. In the mid-14th century, in monasteries across Europe, quarantine began to become a serious health strategy. Infected people were sent to lazarettos, isolated quarantine stations, often built outside of cities. Although initially based on the belief that disease was a punishment from God, over time, monasteries began to realize that avoiding contact actually slowed the spread of disease. Remember the melodious singing of the smoke burner Eben? There is no music here. No one sings. No one tells stories. The monastery lives in the silence of a deserted church. But strangely, it is the silence that makes you hear the voices inside your head more clearly. Part of you wants to run away. Part of you learns to breathe slowly, sit still, and accept. The strangest thing you see is the voiceless zone. A closed room where nuns care for patients in complete silence. No language, no signs. They let the patients handle things themselves. One nun whispers to you after you witness the scene. Some people don't need words. They just need to not be disturbed while they're dying. You shivered, but nodded. Historians still debate the effectiveness of medieval quarantines. Some argue that they were inhumane, isolating the sick as if they were criminals. Others argue that it was the ruthlessness of the administration that saved thousands of lives. Not out of compassion, but through cold discipline. You leave Domus Spiraculi in an unusually quiet state. No one sees you off. They open the gate, you leave, and the gate closes behind you as if you never existed. But you take with you a valuable lesson. Sometimes, it's not about curing a disease that's right. It's about preventing it from spreading. Cure one person, save one life. Stop an outbreak, save a village. In your bag, you now have a bottle of white vinegar, a roll of burlap, and a sheet of paper with a 7-day quarantine schedule. You don't plan on becoming a nun, but you understand that in a world full of disease, everyone has to lock themselves away to protect others. You turn to look at the monastery one last time. There's no smoke, no music, no farewells. But there is a rock-like peace, heavy, rough, but solid. And so, you keep walking. You descend a mountain in a mist as thick as diluted milk, carrying with you the smell of vinegar and the silence, like an invisible cloak. At this point, you begin to see clearly. The people of those days did not cure smallpox with a single formula. They cured it with instinct, with fear, with faith, and occasionally with luck. As you cross a small river, where the water is so clear you can see fish swimming beneath the pebbles, you hear laughter from a nearby market. Not the crowded kind you'd find in a city, but a makeshift gathering place for nomads, people on the fringes of society. Healers, entertainers, charm carvers. They set up their wares under colorful canvas canopies, the smell of sweat, spices, and recklessness blending like a wild perfume. You walk into the market, your eyes scanning the scrawled signs. Evil-repelling herbs, ghost mirror, snake venom essence, only 2 cents. And then, amid the cries and the din of flute music, You see a woman standing at a red-clothed table, displaying small, colorful jars. Her name was Morgelin. Not a doctor, not a nun, just a mixologist. And if rumors were to be believed, she once cured an entire circus of smallpox with something called a meteor potion. "Don't look at me like that," she said when you frowned. "If you think only the monastery has the answer, you haven't seen the whole picture." You smile faintly, but curiosity still overcomes skepticism. Morgelin offers you a taste from the amber vial, bitter as bark, sweet as burnt sugar cane, plantain root, mulberry resin, a little honey. Doesn't kill the virus, but soothes coughs, reduces fever, and helps the sick person eat something. And you know, if a sick person doesn't eat, even God can't save him. You help her for a few days, learning how to mix potions, boil herbs, and taste each drop of a solution like an amateur alchemist. A curious fact: medieval people sometimes used real gold dust in their potions, believing that the light of the sacred metal could drive bad luck out of the blood. Morgelin does not use gold. "I save my gold to buy coffee." She winked. "Oh, if only there was coffee in the world." During your days at the market camp, see all sorts of folk remedies. People heat their foreheads with walnut shell powder mixed with vinegar. They put boiled eggs on chickenpox blisters and bury them to transfer the disease to the ground. One man claims to have survived by rubbing beeswax mixed with goat's milk on his knees. No one can explain why the knees, but you begin to understand. Sometimes the sick need a ritual, not to get better, but to feel like they're doing something. You remember one evening when a little girl was delirious from fever. The family couldn't afford medicine, but Morgelin came anyway. She put a warm cloth over her forehead, put a few drops of herbal infusion in her mouth, and whispered a song in an ancient language. No one understood, but when the girl fell asleep, the tent felt as if an invisible burden had been lifted. Historians still fiercely debate the role of medieval quacks. Some see them as frauds who preyed on fear. Others believe they were a form of indigenous medicine, the preservers of knowledge from prehistory, the jungle, and myth. Morgelin doesn't care. "I don't need a degree, I need results. If people live one more night, I did the right thing." As you leave the market, you turn back for a last look. Old Morgelin is smiling, her yellow teeth flashing in the sunlight, stirring her potion as if she were concocting magic. She waves at you with her wooden spoon, and you feel as if you are leaving a world that is temporary, but not fake. You move on, carrying a few potions, a handwritten recipe, and a strange feeling. Those on the fringes, those who are laughed at, may be the ones who see paths no one else dares to tread. Not all are right, but none are completely wrong. And you begin to wonder, if smallpox is a monster, then perhaps the way to fight it is not a single sword, but a whole collection of odds and ends. Herbs, isolation, faith, and even a little magic. On the cracked dirt road that leads west, you begin to feel the weariness that gathers like moss under your feet. You have lived with smokers, quarantiners, potions, and people who believe in nothing but a handful of leaves and a prayer. But smallpox still exists, still lurks somewhere in every village, in every thatched hut, in a mother's faint breath, in the first red spot on a child's cheek. You come to a larger town, one with stone walls, spear-wielding guards, and a cobblestone square where people gather in the shadow of the church. Here, no one believes in herbs, and few accept quarantine. Instead, they believe in punishment and redemption. The people believe that smallpox is a reminder from God that they have gone astray. As you arrive, a procession of pilgrims is crossing the square. They are whipping themselves, crying, and wailing in broken Latin like broken instruments. Cry, 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 cry for mercy. You step aside, but a tall man, his hands covered in blood from whipping himself, looks at you and says, "If not cleansed by pain, the disease will not spare." That evening, you are taken to a priest named Father Alaric, who is famous in the area for expelling a demon from a dying woman with nothing but prayer and salt. You are skeptical, of course, but he looks at you with no mockery, only the weariness of someone who believes in things you have long forgotten. Father Alaric invites you to sit in a candlelit room. The walls are covered with crosses, and a statue of Saint Sebastian, shot by an arrow, looks up to the sky in suffering. "Do you know why Saint Sebastian is prayed to during a plague?" he asked. "Because he was shot by an arrow, but survived. It is like the body is attacked, but can overcome." You were silent. He poured you a glass of perilla juice that was as strong as rice wine, not because the water cures diseases, but because the sick need to feel that someone is listening to them breathe, even if it is the last time. Historical fact: during the smallpox and bubonic plague epidemics in the 15th century, a religious movement called flagellants spread throughout Europe. They believed that suffering vicariously for the community would appease God's anger. Although not officially sanctioned by the church, in many regions these groups were more respected than doctors. You stay in town for a few days, following the monks to the poorhouses, where the sick lie huddled under thin blankets. Father Alaric doesn't touch anyone. He just stands by the door, praying in a whisper that lasts as long as his last breath. Then he leaves a sprig of marjoram, a piece of bread, and a few words of reassurance. Surprisingly, many people actually feel better after such times. One night, you witness a young woman, feverish and covered in rashes, whispering to Father Alaric that she is not afraid of death, but only afraid of dying without anyone remembering her. He does not promise to save her. He simply takes her hand and says, "I will not disappear. Someone will say my name in prayer." A curious fact: in some regions of Italy and France, people paint pictures of patients sleeping among angels and hang them on their front doors, believing that the image will fool evil spirits and protect the patient from an untimely death. Many people swear that they hear children's laughter next to their hospital beds after hanging the picture. Modern scholars still debate the placebo effect of faith. One camp says that faith can trigger a mild autoimmune response in the body. The other says, no clear medical evidence, only emotional comfort. You, who have seen it from the smokehouse to the monastery, from the quack market to the flogging square, know, anything that makes the sick person feel seen is valuable. You leave town in the dim dawn light. The church bells ring behind you, and Father Alaric's prayer still echoes like a distant sigh. You carry no medicine, no charms, only a consecrated cloth and a few prayers muttered in your head. You've never been a religious person, but in an age where every rash can be a verdict, a verse, meaningless to you, can mean everything to someone else. You continue on, past fields of barley waiting to be harvested, past villages where children no longer laugh in the streets because gatherings are forbidden. In each place, you notice a common thread. People whisper the names of families who have had it, as if smallpox were a curse that would take root if you dared to speak its name. That evening, you stop at a village near the limestone hills. All the houses are closed, save for a tiny inn with a landlady named Agnes, thin, with tightly tied hair, and eyes as alert as a wild cat. If you don't have a cough, no rash, and haven't been around sick people, you're allowed to stay one night, she said. You nod. Over the next few days, you try to listen, to observe. It turns out there's more than just fear. There's also a strange kind of hope, prevention. A potter named Jory invites you into his workshop. He is making bird masks, like the kind seen on Urban Medicine Men, with long pointed beaks like kingfishers and 2 round glass eye holes. Not just to scare children. He laughed. People pour dried herbs into the mine. mint, lavender, sandalwood. It is believed that if you do not smell death, you will not be infected. You try one on. The minty smell is so good it stings your nose, and your visibility is so bad you almost crash into a wooden table. The only downside, no one can see each other's faces. But, Jory shrugged, if you survive, who cares? An official historical fact, the famous bird mask, appeared a lot during the bubonic plague, but variations of it were also used during smallpox outbreaks. Initially reserved for court physicians, it gradually spread to wealthy commoners and was later imitated by villagers with homemade versions made from papier-mâché and sheepskin. Agnes had her own precautions. She rubbed her hands in coal ash mixed with bay leaves whenever she went out, not because she thought it was antibacterial, but because the ash left a gray film on her hands that kept people away. Everyone is afraid of everyone else, she whispered. So it is better to turn yourself into a crazy old lady than to be hugged out of pity. A strange fact, in some places, people hang sachets under the floor, believing that the herbal vapor will gather on the ground and push the disease up to the sky. And rich families hire others to sneeze for them. Yes, there is a profession of sneezing for hire, believing that if the other person sneezes before you, the disease will choose them instead of you. You flip open an old notebook Agnes had hidden under a linen sheet, where she had written down a recipe for a medieval room spray. Rose water, vinegar, cedarwood, and dried orange peel. She sprayed it every morning, not because she believed it would work, but because it made her feel like she owned the house, even if only in scent. One night, you and Jory sat in front of the furnace, talking about the sick room. He asked, in your opinion, if we knew what a virus was like today, would people in the past have lived differently? You sigh. Maybe. But they might still rub ashes, wear masks, and light candles, because prevention is sometimes not a strategy, but a habit of survival. Historians still debate the actual effectiveness of these folk precautions. Some say they were completely useless, based on superstition. Others argue that many of the methods, like smoke isolation, wearing wet cloths, burning incense, inadvertently created hostile environments for bacteria and viruses. That is to say, the beliefs may not be rational, but they are on the right track. You leave the village with a crude bird mask, a bag of herbs Agnes tucked into your shirt, and a simple lesson. Prevention doesn't require understanding the disease. It just requires action, even if it's awkward, even if it's not clear why, even if it feels like playing hide and seek with an invisible monster. As you cross the field toward the horizon, you see the first child in many days running about, face covered, stick in hand, pretending to be a knight fighting the wind. He shouts, I am the smallpox destroyer. Huh? You laugh, though your voice is hoarse. Because it is. That is how men fight. With sticks, with bird masks, with herbs, and with childish games in the age of death. The weather is starting to get cold. The first winter wind blows through your thick sweater, sending a chill down your spine, like someone is lightly scraping your skin with an iron spoon. You reach a low forest where the leaves have turned brown, and the only sound is the crunch of your footsteps on the dry leaves. Your destination this time is a small monastery in the middle of a valley. The stone walls are covered with moss. The smoke from the kitchen stoves is as thin as silk, and the monks move about silently as pious ghosts. You don't need to knock. A young monk is already waiting for you, as if you were destined to come. You are the one who is recording the disease. Come in, don't stand in the wind. This monastery is unlike any you've ever seen. There are no spells, no cries of supplication, no bird masks. Instead, there are books, hundreds of them, stacked neatly like sentinels of knowledge. You enter a large study, where a silver-haired monk holds a magnifying glass and examines the words on parchment. This is where we write down what others don't have time to understand, he said, his eyes never leaving the page. They called him Brother Celestin. He led you around the shelves, pointing to stacks of documents copied from ancient Arabic, Hebrew, and Roman texts, all related to disease, contagion, and especially smallpox. You stopped before a book with a donkey skin cover, inscribed in tiny handwriting, De Variolis et Morbilis, on smallpox and measles. Translated by the Persian scholar Rhazes, said Celestin. He was the first to distinguish between smallpox and measles. An official historical fact, Rhazes, 865 to 925. A Persian physician was the first to describe smallpox as a disease separate from measles. His work was translated into Latin and widely used throughout medieval Europe, especially in the large monasteries that kept medical archives. You sit down by the stone hearth, where several monks are grinding thyme and myrrh, preparing ointments according to ancient recipes. They work in silence, as if every movement is a ritual. No one asks where you come from, but they offer you food, lend you books, and tell you a strange story. A young monk named Luke smiled as he saw you staring at the small glass jars containing something moving. Don't be afraid. They're flies, he said. We're testing to see which species are most attracted to sick people. You blink. And for what? If any species comes to the patient first, it may be the carrier or the reporter. Either way, it is worth recording. A curious fact. Some medieval monasteries actually kept flies, rats, and even dog ticks in sealed chambers to observe contagious disease behavior. Not because they understood the mechanisms of transmission, but because they were trying to grasp the laws of nature, albeit by very anti-hygienic methods. You ask Brother Celestin, do you believe that the solution to smallpox can be found here? He replied, no. But if we don't write it down, future generations won't know where to start. Modern historians still debate the true role of monasteries in the history of European medicine. Some scholars argue that they preserved knowledge, but did not improve it. Others argue that it was the persistence in copying, preserving, and testing Eastern medical ideas that kept the West from falling into a complete medical dark age. You go to sleep that night in your small room, the blankets thick and the light from the oil lamp shining on the ceiling like little stars. Before you go to sleep, you open Rhazes' translation book, read a line. Not everything that is visible is a disease, but there are diseases that live quietly, waiting to be named. The next morning, you say goodbye. Brother Luke gives you a small copy of a handbook containing descriptions of symptoms and weather, soil, and food conditions that accompany each smallpox outbreak in the area. It may be useless, but it may be the key, he said. You leave the monastery with a packet of musk seeds in your pocket, a fragile copy in a sheepskin case, and a new belief. That understanding comes not from magic, but from constantly looking, constantly taking notes, constantly asking why. A wind blows you away from the valley of books and ashes, but the echoes of questions follow you all the way. Does death have a pattern? Can survival be learned like math? You don't have the answer, but you know. If anyone ever comes close to that truth, it is those who live quietly among books and flies. You step out onto the dirt path of the monastery, the cold air biting into your skin, reminding you that winter is near. But you carry something warmer with you, an understanding of perseverance, hope, and how people have fought smallpox with knowledge, faith, and sometimes bizarre methods that you don't know whether to laugh or wonder at. Back in town, you see women sitting by their fires, carefully applying butter and honey ointments to the rashes on their children. The mixture is believed to not only soothe the skin, but also to pull the disease out of the body, a form of treatment based on the ancient principle that disease can be pulled or pushed by ointments and spices. You sigh when you think of the days when you saw parents praying, burning candles, waving charms, and even healers using methods that now seem strange. But remember, they had no choice. No vaccinations, no antibiotics, no PCR labs, just faith, observation, and a little luck. An official historical fact: in the late Middle Ages, the method of smallpox inoculation, variolation, began to be known in Europe, originating from the Middle East and Asia. This was the first form of vaccination, in which people took a little pus from a person with mild smallpox and injected it into a healthy person to create immunity. The method was not perfect, even high risk, but it paved the way for the development of modern medicine later. You wonder, if the ancients had known about smallpox earlier, how many deaths might have been prevented? Historians still debate whether the adoption and spread of the method was hampered by religious and social suspicion. You remember Agnes, with her bird mask and bag of herbs, Jory with his crude but creative masks, Brother Celestin with his dusty books, flies, and endless patience, Luke with his bizarre experiments on fly behavior. You also remember the naughty child who pretended to be a smallpox knight in the village, a small joy in a world full of fear and limitation. And you laugh, knowing that no matter what the method, people always want to fight in their own way, with intelligence, with faith, and with little jokes to keep their spirits up. Now, you're standing by the window, looking out. The winter chill is making your breath rise in little clouds. Smallpox may have claimed millions of lives, but the stories, lessons, and prevention efforts from the Middle Ages remain, a glimmer of light for the future. You pull the blanket higher, feel the warmth spreading, and tell yourself, the fight against illness is not only a bravery of the body, but also a persistent journey of the mind and heart. Let sleep come gently, sweeping you into peaceful dreams, where you no longer hear the horse cough or see the rash, but only peace and hope. You have come to the end of your journey tonight, and I hope you wake up with a little new understanding, a little deeper empathy for those who have struggled with this cruel disease before. Now, turn off the lights, relax your body, and let your breathing be even and gentle.